meeting to order. We'll start with public comment. Public comment is limited to matters relevant to library business. Issues relevant to library business are defined to mean information about library events, issues that the library has the authority to address, items listed on the agenda, and items or issues previously voted on by the library board or that the library board has the authority to consider or vote on in the future. The board chairperson may interrupt or stop a speaker in the public if the public comment is irrelevant, excuse me, irrelevant to library business, unreasonably repetitious, or substantially disruptive. No speaker may employ language that is obscene, scurrilous, or recklessly defamatory in comments that describe board members or any other participants at the meetings or library staff, including their opinions, proposals, and duly constituted actions. No conduct shall be tolerated or allowed that unreasonably provokes or disturbs another or interferes with the conduct of a peaceful meeting. Board members may, but will generally not, respond to comments from speakers. The board chairperson, other presiding officer, or the library director may respond to specific inquiries as appropriate or may direct speakers to the appropriate staff members for assistance. The board may comment, take action, or not take action with respect to public comment at a future board meeting as it deems appropriate. Okay. The first speaker is May Anderson.
Hello, good evening. My name is May Anderson, and I'm here on behalf of the group Students Against Book Banning. Like a Love Story is a novel by Abdi Nazman about growing up at the height of the AIDS epidemic in the United States. Between the years of 1981 and 2000, over 448,000 Americans died of AIDS. That's almost 500,000 people, over 25 times the current population of Clemson. In the school district of Pickens County, the AIDS epidemic is an incredibly underrepresented piece of history, simply because the virus disproportionately affected gay men. That sounds like homophobia. Not only are AIDS victims overlooked by American public education today, they were widely ignored by the government during the AIDS crisis. The CDC was severely restricted from addressing and providing adequate response from the disease by federal government leaders. Like a Love Story is a powerful reminder of the state of society that allowed thousands of people to die, a reminder of what happens when lives are discounted due to hate. The only way we can make it for society's past mistakes is to remember them. Since our education often overlooks the AIDS epidemic, books about the crisis are even more important. We've known for years the only way not to repeat history is to learn from it. Stories about the AIDS epidemic are critical, for queer teens, for their families, and for anyone seeking understanding and empathy. Like a Love Story is a memorializing tribute to thousands of people lost in the AIDS epidemic and a community that protested until it was seen. Judy, Art, and Reza, the central figures in the novel, are high schoolers that struggle to find their voices, true friendships, and love at the height of an epidemic. They're not perfect, but they find growth with their families and each other. In the novel, Judy's uncle Stephen, a man with AIDS, is a role model to all three main characters. His jar of jelly beans is the central image throughout the storyline. Every time he loses a friend to AIDS, he drops another jelly bean in the jar. By the end of the novel, he has over 100 jelly beans. Before he passes away, he eats every single one so he can feel his friends with him in the afterlife. Like a Love Story is a novel about being a teenager that was written for teenagers. It's messy, direct, and unfiltered, much like teenagers themselves. Reading this book is an individual and personal choice, not a decision made by one petitioner claiming that the book is unfit for teens and uncomfortable to read. This book should make you uncomfortable. Two main components of the novel are people dying of AIDS and teenagers living in fear. If you're an adult in this room who has read this book and found hate, not empathy, I beg you to reread and reconsider. Despite the dark themes, the main characters are teens finding their voices and standing up to an unjust society, a lesson we all desperately need today. Like a Love Story's power comes from its ability to speak of our future through the lens of our past. History is uncomfortable. We need to learn from it. Thank you.
Janelle Raines.
South Carolina Library Proviso 27.1 is clear on what a minor should not have easy access to, but there seems to be some confusion on the director's part about what prurient interest means. She leaves off the whole definition. According to South Carolina law, it states this definition, and I quote, "Prurient interest means a shameful or morbid interest in nudity, sex, or excretion and is reflective of an arousal of lewd and lascivious desires and thoughts." I'm going to read one of the several lewd passages from the book you're deciding upon tonight. Parents of minors should be able to allow their minor to explore books in their age-appropriate sections of the library without fear of them being exposed to lewd desires and thoughts. Here is one passage from the book. He leaps back up, takes my hand, and then pulls me onto the bed with him. He kisses me, his tongue exploring every inch of my mouth, his body grinding against mine, sweaty and hot. He's hard, and I am too. He turns me over onto my back, positioning himself on top of me so that his hardness rubs up against mine. He whispers my name into my ear, and I whisper his name in his, until our names cease to have meaning, sounding more like a moan than anything else. He thrusts faster and faster until my name becomes more of a scream than a moan, and then he rolls over to the side of me. "Wow," he says. "Guess I won't be wearing these pants tonight." I notice the gooey stain on his black jeans and the wetness on my blue jeans. This is not the only passage that is lewd in that book. If you refuse to see that this book clearly violates the law, I can only come to one conclusion, that you are fine with minors being exposed to lewd desires and thoughts in books. I agree with a parent who recently reviewed this book on Common Sense Media that stated, "I keep hearing everyone say this is a sweet coming-of-age love story with a good message and that it isn't sexually explicit. Describing how they are thrusting until they are both wet is explicit enough. Describing reaching down his friend's pants and grabbing his erect penis to help him come is explicit enough. Why would you let your child wade through a bunch of very sexual material just so they hopefully find a good message in the story? There are plenty of other books with good messages that don't include all that garbage. Do the right thing tonight, obey the law, and move this book to the adult section of our library." Thank you.
Denise Davidson.
Good evening and Merry Christmas. I'm pleased to see an update to the bylaws on the agenda. And the other item on the agenda is the book, which I have researched online. And on one location, it reveals that this young adult, this book, the genre, is for young adults, LBGTQ, whatever, historical fiction, queer fiction. But who is the target audience? Young adults. Young adults are 18 to 25. So before I go on, I want, for the record, my comments are geared toward book placement. At no point was the word book banning used. It's never been used by a number of people that have been tagged, whatever group you want to put us in. There's a 180-degree difference between book placement, the adult section, and book banning, which has never been referred to. And if an adult wants a child to read this book, then that adult can get that book. But again, this book violates the proviso. So one question that I have tonight, would any one of you on this board read this book to their underage child or grandchild? And by voting for this book, you're violating the proviso. So you have a decision to make. Either you're going to comply with the laws of the state of South Carolina or you're not. Thank you.
Debbie Soul.
I want to speak about the challenging book, Like a Love Story. The small pieces of the book that I read made me sick, physically sick. Is that all there is to this book? Dudes having sex with dudes? I hope not. I wanted to know who wrote this book and why. The author is a queer man from Iran. In his biography interview, he gave 2 reasons to start writing young adult books. First, he was a playwright, and his scripts sat on shelves and were never made. Maybe not the visual we need for teens. Maybe because they would need an R rating. He said his first book couldn't get published and barely anyone would read it. He said, within the young adult genre, I saw a world of readers who might want the stories I need to tell. His second reason was, as a queer person, a lot of his stories that haunt him happened during adolescence. Telling his stories has been a way for him to revisit and heal the most difficult parts of his life. He chose to write about 17 years old because it is the time between childhood and becoming an adult. It's the age of forming identity. So even though the pain and shame and knowing it was wrong, the fear of AIDS he saw in the gay community, and the division his choice caused his family and relationships, he chose to write to teens. I would say that this author and others like him have an agenda. I would hope this book is moved to the adult section.
Kathy Travers.
Like a love story. I never read a love story like this, but anyway, some of the vocabulary in this book was like one lady just said, it was very disgusting, and I really feel like it's over the top for a minor. I don't even know if hopefully they don't know what these words mean, like thrumming and ravish and grinding and stiff ass. I mean, those are some pretty strong expressions. So, and there were several things that I felt like that they were attacking, and that was having a relationship with a girl. Okay, this was a guy. They just never felt that way before, and that was stated. And then also that this was the first team sport that they liked. So, I mean, we're cutting down certain things in our society that are a norm and are healthy. This book is an exploration of love, identity, and fight for acceptance amidst societal challenges like AIDS. And AIDS was a terrible thing, okay? It's sad that all those people died. Laws provide special protections for minors, particularly concerning their safety and welfare. Okay, minors are not able to marry without consent, purchase alcohol, vote in elections, or be responsible for their own well-being and drop out of school. We set up the parameters so our children receive a proper education and are prepared for adulthood. I don't really see where books like this promote that. And this author, you know, somebody talked about his books, and it said that his books shine a light on our darkest corners. I don't think our minors need just to read a book that shines a light on their darkest corners without a psychiatrist or a psychologist or someone helping them through that. So I really think you're setting yourself up for failure when you promote a book like this. I think you need to rethink that.
Brittany Fowler.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. As we move through the most wonderful time of the year, I've been reflecting on how fortunate we are in Pickens County. We live in a county with beautiful natural resources and a library system that truly serves as our greatest shared resource. Our libraries offer a space where every member of this community, young or old, newcomer or lifetime resident, can find information, imagination, and belonging. I'm grateful for the librarians and staff who put so much intention into making our libraries accessible, welcoming, and responsive to the diverse needs of our community. And I'm grateful to this board for your continued willingness to engage thoughtfully with complex decisions that come before you. Tonight, one of those decisions involves the placement of Like a Love Story. I know this topic has obviously generated a lot of discussion, and I want to address it from a place of understanding and logic. One of the things I value most about the library is that it serves the entire community, not just one age group, not just one set of beliefs, and not just one perspective, but everyone. When decisions about materials are made, I believe it is important to consider how those decisions impact the full spectrum of people that you serve. Book placement at its core is a question of appropriate readership, not ideology. Moving a book solely because its themes make some people uncomfortable, rather than because of its literary level, intended audience, or professional review guidance, sets a precedent that may unintentionally narrow access for the very individuals that book was written for. Young adults deserve to see themselves represented on the shelves meant for them. And maybe no one is saying book banning, but moving books is censorship. Not in name, but restricting access to information for ideological reasons is censorship. Our librarians use established criteria, industry standards, and their extensive professional training to make thoughtful placement decisions. I trust their expertise. I believe that trusting our library professionals strengthens our system and ensures that all patrons are served equitably. It's what they are trained to do. So tonight, I would simply encourage the board to consider the entire community as you weigh in on this decision, including the teens who rely on the young adult section to find stories that reflect their experiences, help them grow, or simply to remind them that they are not alone. Thank you for the care you bring to these conversations, and of course, thank you to our librarians who work tirelessly every day to meet the needs of all people across our county. And thank you to everyone who advocates for our library system. I know we all know we have so much to be thankful for, and I'm sorry to all the people I told that there was no public forum tonight.
Meredith Burr.
Thank you. My name is Meredith Burr. I'm a resident of Pickens County and a regular patron of this library generally. The following are going to be my own personal thoughts. I'm also a parent. I regularly take my elementary school age children to the library. We love the library programs, the helpful librarians. My kids are very comfortable going up and asking the librarians for any help that they need, finding whatever books they're interested in that day. We love the libraries. From birth, I've encouraged a love of reading in my kids, bringing them to programs, reading to them, and responding to what they want to read and what their interests are. As my kids grow, I want them to continue to have access to a range of books so they can learn stories about all kinds of people living through all kinds of times. I unfortunately have not yet read Like a Love Story. I've read the passages that people find objectionable online, but I also understand that these are set in a larger context and that this book has won awards as a YA Book of the Year, so it really is appropriate that it's in the YA section. It tells the coming-of-age story of a gay young man in New York City during the time of the 1980s AIDS crisis. These stories are important to tell, and they need to be accessible to the teens who want or need to read them, whether they identify with the queer characters, and I have people in my life who would identify and feel seen in having a story told about a queer character's experience, or whether they just want to read about something that they're not familiar with so they can learn more about people and about a time. I want to echo that libraries are for everyone. Knowledge needs to be accessible, and it needs to be accessible to the people that it's targeted to. A book on a shelf is not a threat. Those people who do not want to read a story or whose parents are concerned about the content can bypass it. There are many things I don't like to read. I don't read them. And I stay informed about what my kids are reading so that we can discuss anything that they find challenging, or just so I can know what they're reading. Please don't restrict access to an important story for teens that do want access to this. Please leave Like a Love Story in the YA section. Thank you for your time.
Okay, excuse me, that concludes the public comment. We'll move on to the bylaws update. The existing bylaw currently reads that we're changing nominations for board officers of chairman, vice chairman, secretary, and treasurer shall be made at the March meeting of the board. Elections of these officers shall occur at the May meeting of the board, and their term will begin in January. The proposed changes reads, each December before the chairman's term concludes, the chairman of the current year shall call a special meeting to be held in January prior to that month's regularly scheduled board meeting. The purpose of this special meeting is to nominate and elect board officers, chairman, vice chairman, secretary, and treasurer, whose terms shall run from January to December for the upcoming year. Nominations may be made by any board member. Nominations with subsequent elections will be conducted sequentially in the following order: chairman, vice chairman, secretary, treasurer. A board member may be nominated for more than one office. Do I have a motion to approve these changes?
I make a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay. Holiday schedule update?
The council passed a new handbook, and with the addition of adding Veterans Day to the county scheduled holidays to be closed. So we're just adding that to the holiday schedule that y'all approved at the last
Closed.
meeting.
Not changed hours, closed completely that day?
Closed,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right, item number 4.
Do they need to vote?
Do we have to
Need to
vote?
vote on
Oh, even though the county,
Yeah.
all right.
It just updates our handbook as well.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the Veterans Day off for the library, closing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in, any discussion? All those in favor? Okay. Okay, the reconsideration appeal is for Like a Love Story, as we've heard. We'll start with asking, has everyone read the book?
I did not read the book.
I didn't read the book. I didn't either.
Okay, so 3 people have not read, and I assume that you're abstaining since our policy states that you can't vote on a book if,
That's what the policy states, yes, ma'am.
yes. Did you read the book?
Yeah.
Okay,
I read 3 chapters of the book, and there was nothing about big black Chevys or anything in it, so I wasn't gonna make it through it.
okay. All right then, Hap, did you wanna start off with your?
Sure.
Oh.
Motion.
Do you make a motion?
To keep the
Just a motion.
a motion,
Do you wanna make a motion, Hap?
yeah, make a motion for,
Or
to,
somebody?
to keep it in the YA section.
Yeah, I'll, well, I
Just
was gonna do
whatever.
that at the end.
I
of this,
thought he was going to do it at the end, that's.
But I'll move the Like a Love Story remain in the young adult section of the library system.
Second.
Second,
Okay, now,
any discussion?
that's what this is.
Did,
Go for it.
okay, go ahead.
All right. So the petitioner on this request objects to Nazamian's book on the basis of inappropriate graphic sexual descriptions that would incite prurient interest in minors and as such violates Proviso 27.1, citing specific pages on which these can be found. The petitioner suggests that additional resources to support these claims are federal laws on exposing minors to obscene material. In the expanded comments, the petitioner cites selected entries from Common Sense Media, one of which criticizes the sexual content. Further, the petitioner identifies school districts that have banned the book or are challenging it. Proviso 27.1 does refer to removing books from the young adult section that have prurient material in them, and the book does in fact have explicit references to sex and a few brief explicit scenes. The proviso does not give guidance as to what should be judged as prurient, leaving us with a legal definition, which was stated earlier, a morbid interest in nudity, sex, or excretion, and is reflective of an arousal of lewd and lascivious desires and thoughts. It would be difficult to characterize the scenes as morbid, as they are not protracted, representing encounters that fit naturally in the overall plot of the book, and represent behaviors that are not rare among teen populations. For this reason, they would not likely arouse thoughts and desires that teens do not already have. To suggest otherwise is disingenuous. It should also be pointed out that cited references and scenes are not the centerpiece of the book. This is evidenced by the petitioner's own references, as the first page cited is 271 in a 413-page book. And one of the common sense quotes by the petitioner is largely a positive review. In fact, reading the full text of the Common Sense Review reveals that it is overwhelmingly positive. This brings us to the petitioner's reference to the law regarding obscene material. Law and precedents are clear, even in the case of minors, that a book must be considered on the whole as not having literary or artistic merit. This is not the case for this book. In fact, sex is treated in all its complexity with levels of restraint and a pervasive emphasis on safe sex. The protagonists, for the most part, engage in sexual behavior in loving relationships. The young people in this book are dealing with many issues that many in any population of teens might be. Heterosexual and homosexual love are presented sensitively, as is the importance of honesty in both romantic and friendship relations. The prejudices against both immigrants and gays are realistically presented, as the author has direct experience with both. The complexity of relationships with parents, especially as colored by a beloved gay uncle dying of AIDS or a conflicted teen who is struggling with the reality of being gay in a homophobic environment, are not trivialized, with some parents learning to be more accepting and others not. It is a story of teens using their talents for the good and struggling toward commendable goals. This book is also an accurate history lesson about the AIDS epidemic of the late 1980s and the toll it took on segments of our population during a time when society was coming to grips with the cause, transmission, and lethality of the disease, especially in the days before effective treatments were available. It also deals with the effectiveness and sometimes necessity of peaceful protest to mitigate indifference or outright prejudice by the church, the pharmaceutical industry, and the government. Overall, this book is a heartwarming tale with realistic characters with much to offer young people about acceptance, love, forgiveness, and the fact that it can make a difference. Lessons that are sorely needed in this divisive time. I might add, as for the banning or challenging of these books by school districts, we must hope that public libraries would be a place where all members of the population can find materials to speak to them, not just the alleged demographic majority. Finally, as a reminder, parents can opt to have access to the books that their teens check out. In this case, it might be worthwhile to read this book with their teens.
Danny?
Kind of thinking where to begin. Let's just lay the proviso aside and let's just look at it from a parent point of view and as well as humanity, okay? Hap mentioned that kids already have this sexual arousal and that doesn't influence a book, but it does. The other thing, in my point of view, the other thing I see is laying the proviso aside, a 13-year-old, some parents don't mind that. That's good. I know there's some parents that do mind that. They don't want their 13-year-old coming across a book like this. So if we're going to be for the whole community, make the book available. But make sure those that do not want their child to stumble across it is in a place that the parents that know where the book is at their child can get the book. That's what I'm looking at. But it does, in my opinion, it goes against the proviso. So I'd like to see it moved to adult.
Okay, since I'm the last person to read the book. The book, to me, the book describes a sweet love story centered on friends and family, highlighting the unconditional love among three young people without any romantic beginnings or judgment. This book is clearly written for the YA group, and I can say with almost certainly that if the story's dynamic would have been about a young male and female, we would not be discussing this book. But then there would be no story, no telling of someone's struggles growing up gay, living in fear that they would be rejected by their parents, the very people that should love them unconditionally regardless of who they chose to love. Whether people want to accept this or not does not matter. There are many teens struggling with these very things today, and yes, in Pickens County. This book gives teens hope of finding loving, caring friendships and possibly a loving relationship with someone who will value them for who they are. One emphasis that was brought to light time and again was the need to practice safe sex, whether you're a homosexual or heterosexual relationship. Regardless if people want to believe it or not, sexuality needs to be discussed and protection needs to be in the forefront of that discussion, not only for unwanted pregnancies, but also sexually transmitted diseases. This book showed a great deal of compassion, empathy, and family love when it came to taking care of the uncle who was dying of AIDS. This was a love story in itself, the way the sister and niece took care of him to make sure he felt their love so he could pass with dignity and respect. To me, there is nothing puring about this book. I believe it should stay in the YA section.
I have
So
some
now-
questions. I'm just going to better understand what we're talking about here. The law, the proviso specifically says the book has to be prurient, and it's tested standard, legal standard for prurient to mean the entire book, not page 218. Is that
There were actually just 2 pages that described one
Yes,
sexual
you have
act
to consider the whole
book.
okay? And just I
There
mean,
were not dudes having sex with dudes in the whole book. That's not what the book was about.
So Denise taking exception, folks pointing out that her goal is to ban books. Earlier, and she's taking exception to that. The banning the books for educational purposes, not banning, but moving a book for educational purposes is allowed, right? You guys move books all the time because it's.
We do, but our intent is not to, it's intent. We do. We move books based on, one of the things is what audience they're written for.
Okay. The big thing that just, looking at like the difference between banning a book and moving a book and where they're basically the same thing is when you're doing it for political coercion. That's what.
If the
the legal
intent is
folks.
censorship, then that would be problematic.
So the lady that came up and said, hey, this isn't our morals, isn't our values, that's not education issue or that the book is out of their reading ability. That's just pointing out that you specifically don't believe that it's a moral and upstanding book. So that's where moving it for that purpose is the same as banning it, then, right? That's for that constitutional purpose. Okay, I get it. So as library professionals, I'm sure you guys have had like probably 20 classes of training in how to curate the books. I got you. And then just all of the literature keeps talking pretty specifically about when it's crystal clear that folks are wanting the books moved because of ideological and their own religious or political beliefs, that's what creates the infringement. Burning it, like she, we would think that she probably would be open to doing, or banning it, or moving it. So am I wrong in that? Is that something that from a professional? As an engineer, I'm trying not to kill people, right? I want to have great ideas that don't hurt people. So in y'all's case, you don't buy these books specifically so that the 5% of the community that's gay, gets more people gay, right? Because I went out and I asked some kids, some high school kids, I was like, if you read a book and it made being gay sound really, really good, would you be gay? And the feedback to me was, if I try to I'm just paraphrase, if I visualize what they're doing, I'm probably not going to want to participate. So no book, no matter how written, is going to trick somebody into being gay, I think is the deal. My mother was 14 years old. She was raised in a Christian home for abandoned children. And so I asked her, what do you think? 14-year-old folks. And she said that she didn't know that you would get pregnant if you weren't having your period, and which makes no sense. And that she was raised in the home up in northern portion of Dacusville. And it was all religious based, and they had never had any conversations about sex. And so my mother and her sister got tired of being beaten, so they left, during a rainstorm on a Sunday and walked to town. And within 3 months, my mother had, was homeless and had a boyfriend, my dad, who happened to marry my mom and stay married to her for almost 30 years, because he didn't know about protected sex either, because nobody ever talked about it. I just want to point out, Denise left already, so she got her attention and she just left. So for the record, if you don't mind, I want this in the things. It's 37 minutes, and she didn't sit through the entire discussion. Could we put that in there, please?
Same with Janelle Raines.
Yeah, and Ms. Raines too.
No, she left.
Right. They all left before the discussion, 37 minutes into it, once they got their attention.
Okay.
The thing for me here is, it's clear that you guys don't seem to be wanting to vote for it, and you seem to want to vote for it regardless. It's not prurient, based on the distinction that they're making from a legal perspective. And then it clearly shows that when government folk, and this is the problem with the populist movement like we're in right now, if you'll fight about an issue is more important than if you actually do something. So if you guys are willing to fight and raise Cain, right, that's more important than you guys actually having a world-class operation where you're getting feedback from your customers that's better than what Apple gets. So it's more important that we fight about this smaller issue where you guys move the books all the time. And if we don't make it a political issue, most folks would come in and ask you guys to move a book because of something like this, and you can consider it because maybe it is, like the lady said, inappropriate at this age for kids to be reading it. Setting aside the fact that if you think your 13-year-old might come across something that you believe will scar them at the library, why would you cut them loose in the library? And when I talked about it with my parents and spoke out with my dad introduced me to Jewish people that lived in the neighborhood so I could ask them about their experiences. And then he pointed out to me that probably not the best book to be reading at that age, right? But they let me drive all the way across town on a bicycle to go to the library, and what was he going to do about it? I came across the book fair and square. If he'd been careful enough not to want me to be exposed to it, then he could have supervised me just as easily, right? But you know what he did? He's a brick mason, barely finished high school, and he had a conversation with me about the content of the book. And we talked about, hate and whatnot. And at the time, most Southerners were perceived as deeply racist. And here's my dad, the only Republican on the entire Mill Hill, broke down crying when he saw that Reagan was shot. And here's a guy just having a conversation with me about what's in this book, this violence and this hate, right? But he was honest, at least, about the violence and hate that we'd grown up in, the use of the N-word, all those things that went on and was common in our culture. And he was pretty honest about sex and pretty open about the idea that, he had sex with a 14-year-old girl when he was 16 or 17, and they ended up raising a kid, So you think about like that explicit level of discussion that he was open to having. With no prior education, his dad was a World War II veteran, had PTSD, and killed himself in the 60s. So he didn't have like the greatest raising, but at least he was knowledgeable enough. And then the one thing that he stood out to say was, because I remember asking him about book burning and book banning, and he pointed out, this is key, that when you let other people decide what you can read and what you have access to, you're letting them decide what you think and how you're living. And that in America, we have freedom of speech for a reason, so that you can disagree and so that you can expose yourself to ideas that other places try to control. And when you see a populist movement like the one we're in now, and they focus 100% on controlling what you can say, like for example, Denise, she promoted a motion on the Easley City Council the other day to limit what politicians can say and to make it, a penalty that she can enforce against those folks. I mean, that's just bullshit. I mean, that's just as patent bullshit as you can get in a political environment. To tell a politician that they can't tell the people something that might excoriate somebody over here, I mean, it's completely not defensible. And the best you can hope for is a dirty letter from somebody. But when the movement in politics is moving to the point where, she can deny all she wants to, but categorically clear, they didn't have their message management under control when I was on the council. So folks that they're affiliated with, people that have been in these rooms, called me and were very clear in exactly what they wanted to do. And book banning was 100% what they wanted, right? So I described her as a liar once here in the meeting, and the reason I described that is twofold. If you clearly have this motivation, which you seem to have as well, but you say this, that's a lie. And the second piece of it is when you take an issue like this, like I don't want my kids to be exposed, and I've raised some pretty good kids, to be exposed to things like that sexual content that I came in. And if they were, I would be open to having a conversation with them. But when I went to the library with my kids, I just stayed with them. Because the library is not a safe place. It's not a place you can cut your kids loose. It's not a playground. These people aren't here to supervise your kids, so I just stayed with my kids. Just stay with your kids. If you think that your 13-year-old boy is going to run across that book, stay with your kid. Or raise your kids so that you know if they come across an idea, they trust you enough to come to you and not hide it from you and to talk about it with you and to learn from you. And maybe, hopefully, to share your views, or at least to have enough knowledge and understanding about sex, right? Because it comes, folks say it should only come from the parent. How did my mother teach me about it, right? When I was coming along when I was 10, my mom was 24 years old, super attractive. We would go to the Slide and Rock and to the lake. She worked a third shift. All the cops would come and do the patrols and stuff and talk to my mother and her sister because they were very, very attractive, and they'd be sleeping after the third shift out there while we were getting sunburned. And so I asked her, questions about this kind of stuff, and she was not prepared at 14 or 15 because she'd been shielded from it. And she was not prepared at 24 because she didn't graduate from high school till the same year I did. So I happen to have a fairly reasonable, bright intelligence level and could read books and understand them at a very young level. Most folks don't. And most folks' parents, they're not available in the way that mine were. So what I would say to you is, if a big piece of our community feels like you're infringing on their rights and they express it in the way they did, and it's crystal clear to you that there's a legal protection here from our Constitution that you're openly willing to violate, how do you call yourself a constitutional conservative at that point? How do you call yourself a Christian? And how do you want to say that you're trying to protect children? Because you protect children by educating them enough and exposing them to the information, but more importantly, by putting their parents in a position that the library's already put the parents to raise the children the way they want to raise their own children. And then if you think that your kid might come across something that he shouldn't see or that you don't want him to see at whatever age, supervise your children is the answer. That's it, right? Am I wrong in that, right? That's like where the legal standard comes in, is how you guys operate your library. Am I wrong in that?
Right.
The idea is to serve the entire community as a whole.
Yes.
But Danny, you're going to vote against it again? You're going to vote to move it,
Well, we're
right?
going to take a vote right now.
I'm just asking. Is that your intention?
I have a question.
Fair enough.
Did you read the book completely 100% before you placed it on the shelf? Or did you just go by what the publisher required?
We followed the collection development policy that has been approved by the board, which is to look at reviews, to look at as much information as we can about the books, and then choose those
So
books
no?
accordingly.
How many books do you guys buy a
We
year?
can't.
can't
Sometimes
read
the
'em all.
street date of the book, when they're available to the public, is the date that we put them on the shelf.
How many books do you guys buy a year?
Thousands.
All right, so it takes
10,000.
it takes 10 hours to read a 300-page book.
Yeah.
Right at 10 hours. I mentioned that to Rex, and Rex